Thank you for joining us. I'm thrilled to be hosting today's Reward Careers webinar alongside Jack Booth. The countdown is officially over and we're so excited to bring this session to life. A little bit about myself and the team at Fraser Jones. We are a global HR executive search and recruitment consultancy, and we sit within the reward practice where we support reward professionals from advisor level right up to director level for all appointments. So whether you're just starting out in reward or looking to take your next big step, today's conversation is packed with insight, advice, and inspiration. We're brought together by an exceptional panel of senior leaders, Andre from EY, Gillian from Dentons, and Pav from ICG, who'll be sharing their personal journeys, practical strategies, and the lessons they'd wish they'd known earlier. We'll be diving into CV and interview tips, navigating different reward roles and sectors, the power of mentorship and networking, positioning yourself for leadership. It's a privilege to have you all here. And if you have any questions during the session, please pop them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. And I will leave you with Jack Booth.
Thanks, Leona, and hello everyone. I'm Jack Booth. I also sit within the reward practice here at Fraser Jones. I'll be honest, today is my first day back from paternity leave, so please be gentle with me. I've had a few more coffees than I would have done typically, but what I love about today's session is that it's not just about job titles or career ladders. It's real stories, honest advice, and the kind of insight you won't find in a job description. So whether you're here to ask questions, take notes, or just listen in, I hope you leave today feeling a little more confident, inspired, and maybe even more curious about what's next.
Super. So we'll just jump straight in. I'd like to begin with an introduction to reward as a career path. So the first question is for the lovely Pav. And what is reward and why is it a strategic function?
Thank you, Leona. Thank you, Jack. Thanks to Fraser Jones for setting this up. Hi, everyone. My name is Pav. So I guess a little bit about this first question. So for myself personally, I always found that reward is the perfect blend of finance, but with a HR lens on top of it. So I think it's fair to say that we're all of us here, you know, from the team at Fraser Jones to everyone who's either in the reward function or in a benefits function. We're all incredibly analytical people. We're very numbers driven. You know, we like our numbers, we like our Excel sheets. And, you know, we could have gone down maybe the finance route, the group FP&A route, but rather than seeing everyone as a cost center, you know, we like to see people as people, and, you know, so we can have much more of a direct impact with the decisions that we're making for these people in terms of their compensation. And where I really see this, Leona, coming in as a strategic function is really that piece about, well, at the end of the day, we all from the graduate to the CEO, you know, we all go in order to get paid in our respective jobs. So the work that we're doing, we're really there to ensure a P4P culture. So I'm sure you guys have already heard it in your various firms, maybe in different versions of it, but it's that kind of pay for performance culture. You know, we want to incentivize the right behaviors, we want to incentivize excellence, as well as incentivizing compliance and controls. You know, we really are that control and support function with a perfect balance of controlling and putting in checks and balances, as well as supporting the business to achieve new heights and successes.
Super, thank you, Pav. And then Andre, we'll move over to you. What are the key skills and competencies needed at analyst level?
So I think there's a lot. I mean, from Pav's introduction, you can see that it's a very dynamic skill set required in reward. So there are some of the basic things that everyone would think of. Pav mentioned Excel. I'm definitely a fan of Excel. These days, there are a lot of other tools that you should be savvy with, obviously, but Excel continues to be something that everyone seems to have to go back to and use in their role. So I think a technical, in terms of software and analytics skill set is essential. And I think Excel is a starting point for that. But a certain adaptability to learn and try new things is the broader part of that. There's a commercial sensibility that's needed. So again, Pav mentioned, finance is a big part of the reward role. So you need to bring in that conversation into HR. You know, we're constantly talking in the wider HR specialisms of being commercial, understanding the strategy, understanding the financial drivers. Reward is where the rubber hits the road for that. So you absolutely have to be savvy with those numbers. So software skills, commercial skills. And I suppose the third one that I think is really important is the human element. So for me, that's about delivering messages, communication skills, storytelling, and empathy. So it's understanding your different audience members and how to take that commercial aspect and the technical skills that you've got and then deliver them in a way that people can accept and engage with.
Amazing. Thank you, Andre. The next part is career journeys for each of you. So if we could start with Andre and you could give us an overview of your career path.
Sure. I didn't say before, hello, I'm Andre. I've been in one HR specialism or another for about 20 years. I started off actually going to drama school first, though, and trying to be an actor. That didn't work out. So hence why I always talk about storytelling. But then I got a role in a recruitment consultancy. I liked what I saw. I liked the various HR elements that I saw from that. And so I decided to go back to uni and do my CIPD, do a master's in human resource management. And I transitioned in-house doing recruitment, started to dabble in a bit more HR operations, and gradually started working my way down different specialisms in HR. So from there, I did a number of interim roles when I moved out of London to Manchester in a difficult market. And that wasn't an intentional move for me. It was one by necessity, but it gave me a real exposure to variety. And it made me realize I really enjoyed change and variety in my roles. So that helped me then to do generalist HR, HR systems and analytics, then into reward, into change programs, into a consultancy for a while, went to PwC and faced off to clients as well, and then went back in-house to do generalist HR and then back out again now to consultancy. So without going into too much detail, trying lots of things across the HR specialism, in-house and consulting over the last 20 years.
Brilliant. Now we'll leave it to Gillian.
Hi, so I'm Jill. And my career so I did a degree in business studies, which had a year in industry in the middle of it. And during that year, I worked I'm old enough, it was actually a personnel function, and didn't necessarily think that's what I was going to do at the end of my degree, but that same organisation offered me a grad position. So I went back in as a generalist HR consultant and quite quickly became the person that was quite happy to do things like the share save application process, the pay review spreadsheets, and then started going towards reward, then went into a sort of a global reward function. And that was me 25 years ago. And I've been in reward ever since. But I've worked through a sort of a number of different sizes of organizations, different industries, roles where I have literally been the only reward person, to ones where I've been in a team of 120 people. And I think those experiences just really give you lots of different aspects to reward, because not all reward jobs are the same. Excuse me. So just a real variety of sectors, sizes of organizations, different focus areas within reward, but pretty much purely reward for about 25 years now.
Thanks, Jill. And Pav.
So my journey's been a little bit different, I guess, in the reward space. I think it's fair to say that reward for a lot of people who end up in it isn't the first area that they kind of start in. They'll start in that generalist piece, and then they'll realize that, oh, there's this wonderful area of reward where it's analytical and it's actually quite a nice niche. But I've actually now been in reward for, gosh, I guess coming up to 8 years. And I actually was quite fortunate in that I began my career in reward. So shout out to my brother Dida, who actually got me kind of into this area and kind of guided me into the world of reward. I've worked from a real plethora of financial services organizations. So everything from your close brothers, I'm sure we've all heard them, from the motor finance scandal that's been going around, to your larger scale organizations like your HSBCs, to your BlackRocks, as well as your smaller headcount organizations, to your Cinvans, to your ICGs. And to Gillian's point, it really has taught me that whilst it's quite similar in terms of what we're doing day to day in the different firms, we're running the year-end process, we're sitting down with ExCo members, we're advising on recommendations. Each firm has its own niche, and I guess sometimes you might naively think that, oh, it's a smaller firm, it's going to be easier, but you really end up channeling that same discipline and same focus that you're giving for a HSBC, kind of 250,000, but you're channeling that into 250 people. So I think it's fair to say that in Reward, it's not really the size of the headcount that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Thank you all. So pivotal moments, transitions, and decisions that have shaped your journey. I'll start with you, Andre.
Sure. I think I alluded to one of those already, which is when I moved out of London to Manchester, and it was a tough market. Having to go out there and get whatever interim contract was available, not necessarily as a choice, but a necessity, helped me to learn new things and forced me to challenge myself, taking on roles and companies that I wouldn't have usually gone for. So I think from that, if I were to translate that as a learn, don't necessarily shy away from contracts. If you're in that position, you don't always have to hold out for a perm role. You can go for interim. You can get an awful lot from that. I think another thing that helped me was going from a generalist role and getting this HR systems role for the first time. It was putting myself outside of my comfort zone, using a skill set I'd used a little bit in other roles. But I was lucky to get that role based on my CV, but it exposed me to Reward. So in the time I was in this role for 2.5 years, there were about 5 heads of Reward. So the constant change then, but as a data person in that company, I was handing over some of those things, being the backup for it. And that's where I got into Reward, learned that I loved it, and picked up skills that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get otherwise. So I suppose, again, it's be open to changes. Don't necessarily look just at the most direct path for your career. Be open to those opportunities. And then I suppose third and finally was the consulting switch, going from in-house into consulting. Again, that's not always a path that works for people. You don't always, especially in Reward, have the sort of client-facing sensibilities and gregariousness to go out there and push in the market. So it was a test for me, and something that actually I've gone back to again because I enjoy it so much. So consultancy is another option, I suppose, is the third lesson from me.
You and Jill?
I think for me, it was when I got the opportunity to join RBS. So that was my first sort of purest Reward role. It was a huge team at the time, but they were very good at the time at kind of rotating people every couple of years through different roles. So you had very deep knowledge for a couple of years at a time and worked through a number of different teams, from kind of Reward partnering, managing their global pay review, doing stuff, we had a fleet of 6,000 cars and we were changing benefit providers. So just lots of, I feel like I learned a huge amount in that spell at RBS, and that really cemented the ability for me to move from sort of Reward consultant, Reward manager into a head of Reward role by getting these deep experiences.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jill. And Pav?
I guess for me, more so of a operational point that I really enjoyed, because it was really me kind of owning it from start to finish and also challenging the status quo, was running the ICARA wind down process over at BlackRock. So I'm sure for those of you who haven't done it yet, or a lot of you have already done it, it's the wind down. So should a firm need to cease operations over the course of the next 24 months, how would we do that? What would be the financial implications? What would be the compensation implications? And I think that was because it was such a large scale project, for a firm the size of BlackRock. It was, the decisions and the calculations and the impact that I was making through that, it really reverberated throughout not only the region, but globally as well. And then I guess just kind of reviewing the process and finding out some, I guess, prior issues that had been identified, and then kind of covering for those and say, well, okay, this is the new approach that we've taken. This is what we're going to be doing going forward, writing on a process doc, just leaving something a little bit better than I started with it. And I think that really changed my mindset for Reward, in the sense that, everything we do, we want to leave something a little bit better off.
Great. Thanks, Pav. The next question is navigating early career challenges. So we'll go to you first, Jill.
Yeah, so I think for me here, it's thinking about, it's always having in mind, what can I learn from this task or this process that I'm doing or this piece of work? And then always trying to think of who your customer is. So I think in those early stages, it's quite easy to just think of what the task is ahead of you, but actually moving beyond that and actually thinking, why does somebody need this information they've asked me for? What is the best way to present it? How can I simplify this so it's user friendly for a non-reward audience? I think if you've got that in your mind at those early stages, that will help you get noticed, that will help you have the conversation. And the more and there's no such things as silly questions to ask people to make sure that you get that scoping right early on, rather than, you know, spending a lot of time building something and then it's not actually what somebody needed. And just being open to opportunities. I still approach everything and what am I going to learn from this? And that served me quite well, I think.
Thank you. And Pav?
Well, I wanted to share a piece of advice that my first ever manager had shared with me. So, you know, when you're early on in your career, you know, you start off and, you know, you're going to be enjoying a breadth of different things. You're going to be, I guess, a jack of all trades, master of none, because you are still trying to see and become specialized in multiple different areas before you choose your given speciality. But I think the piece that I really learned early on was the power of checking your own work, which might sound very, very simple, but I guess in these companies and firms, especially where you have a team or a manager, you might think that, okay, my work is now going to be reviewed and then it's going to be taken forward, you know, whether it's a 4-eye check, a 6-eyed, or even an 8-eye check. And the piece of advice that I was given by my first manager was that it's not my job to review your work. And that's actually always stayed with me in my career going forward. So any piece of work that I essentially shift off of my desk and onto someone else's, I ensure that I've essentially already done the 4-eye check, or, you know, we're all pretty good at Excel. We're all masters of Excel. Like, is there a way that I can build out some type of checking sheet, some way that, you know, it's not my eyes checking it, it's actually Excel checking it, so I can make sure that, you know, it's been 4-eyed review before it leaves my desk. And I think just having that credibility of, you know, the numbers that are coming off of your sheet or off of your laptop or from your email being double checked, and just knowing that, okay, we don't need to worry about Pav's numbers, we're confident with those and we can take those forward. Because, you know, if you might just send an email off and think, okay, that's it done, but that data will go into a million different places.
Okay, great. And how to build credibility and influence early on. I'll come to you for this, Andre.
Well, I suppose there are a few things I was thinking of, but one of them feeds really neatly on from what Pav was saying around your consistent quality of work, that attention to detail. And that, I think I was literally saying to a colleague yesterday, I go into a kind of delivery mode where I do a first draft of something, but also have a reviewer mode that I apply usually to colleagues' work to review what they've done. And it is a real knack to try and flip from one to the other, doing your own work and checking it and auditing it. So I suppose I'm underlining there the point that Pav made. I suppose just adding to that auditability, the way that you lay things out in Excel, in documents, having a logical structure, not just rushing to the answer, but having a way that people who look at it can understand how you got there as well, is a very good thing, and it helps keep your thought process tidy. Communication, I mentioned earlier about storytelling. I do think that's really important. So especially at a junior level, I think it's difficult to be concise. Try to be concise where you can. And I know I'm waffling in my delivery of this, but having direct, quick answers, reviewing what you produce to be one sentence instead of 3, making that length of delivery appropriate. And that goes for work that's written, but also for presentations. If you're launching something to the workforce, being concise, you don't have to fill the full-time slot. You have to get the message across. And also in interviews, I think it's a very common falling point for many people to try to deliver the message they want to in their first answer. For everything that they want to get across in the whole interview. Just listen carefully and answer the question. That's the same in meetings. I think that's a key skill in somebody at building credibility early on. And then finally, I mentioned before that commercial soundness. Read the business strategy, understand what the objectives are for your team and for your manager, have the context so that when you're delivering things, those thoughts will naturally come to you. So you're referring back to them you're talking in a way that reflects that business context.
Okay. And Pav, some insight there?
Yeah, I think just to build a little bit on what Andre was saying there, I think it's very important to, especially on the credibility and influence point, it's that, at the end of the day, we're spending all of our time, all of our 9 to 5, we're in the weeds of the data, aren't we? We're constantly downloading Aon reports, we're constantly in the reward mindset. When you're speaking to a senior stakeholder, a global head of private equity, or the CEO, it's very easy to sometimes get a little bit, intimidated, or think that, okay, I don't really want to share what I've got, or not really wanting to kind of sound like I'm over explaining or simplifying things. But it's very important to remember that these people, they're not in the weeds of the reward data on a day-to-day basis. They literally will look at reward, if you're a CEO, at the year end when they're looking at the high level spend, and as and when they're looking to hire someone. So have the confidence to really, have an opinion, bring it to the table, and remember that in that instance, you probably know a little bit more than they do on the subject matter at hand, and they're leaning on you as the subject matter expert. And then cater your responses accordingly. I mean, if you're speaking to a board member, it's going to be very different to how you're speaking to a chief exec, to how you're speaking to a regular manager in a different jurisdiction who's looking to hire for the first time. So catering your responses, and also having the confidence to bring your opinion to the table and to essentially teach a little bit about what's going on in the market, what are some of the transparencies, and what are some of the rules and regulations that you're trying to stay on the right side of.
Brilliant, thank you. The next part is upskilling and career development. So looking at certifications, training, and experiences that accelerate growth. So Gillian, could you answer this question for us, please?
Yeah, so personally, I didn't do any sort of specific rewards certificates. I did my CIPD in the early days after graduating. But I think, again, it comes back to that continual learning, continual development, where you can find the opportunities. So early doors, again, was lucky enough to go through things like Hey Job Evaluation training or survey provider training to actually really get into the nitty-gritty of understanding market data at the very start of my reward career. Or I've had it's looking for the opportunities to fill the gap. So I've had one role where I was the standalone head of reward, and we were changing pension provider, and I was literally trying to Google and teach myself various like professional websites, etc., about what it was I was going to then have to consult with employees on, and really using our external advisors. So again, it's just that bit about looking for the opportunities, making sure you've done your homework. Don't always assume that the head of reward you're working with will have done everything, because there are a lot of areas of reward that are specialised. So there's a little bit of finding out, do you have a niche yourself, or are you going to try and cover a broad spectrum of area? Working a lot of the benefits work is very different than some of the comp areas. So it's really, I think, as much as possible to saying yes to projects, saying yes to stuff that's side of desk, and that will get you the exposure and the experience that you need to maybe make the moves when you want to.
Perfect. I'll go to you next, Pav.
So I think more sort of a strategy, and something I think that we all probably already do, is to really think of things from an operational excellence standpoint. So, any type of process you're involved in, we're all involved in year-end processes. We're all involved in different processes that are specific to our business unit, specific to our respective companies. Look to automate processes, look to make them a little bit better, look to reduce time on them. Because if you were to say to a senior manager that, okay, this was a process that was taking, 30 hours a month, and it meant that Pav was unable to take any holiday in the first week of that month. But now we've adjusted it and made it in a point so that Pav is no longer the bottleneck. We've reduced it from 30 hours to 10 hours. Then in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, this person's just freed up 20 hours of time without increasing any additional cost or requiring any new pieces of tech. So I guess from a practical standpoint, I think there's always bits and pieces that, we can always look to do a little bit better, a little bit quicker, and a little bit more efficient. And that's just something that it's quite easy, I think, to do, because at the end of the day, you're only making yourself your own life a little bit easier.
How do you stay current with trends in rewards? So examples are pay transparency, DEI, global mobility. Jill, if you could answer this question.
Yeah, so I
Thank you.
think there are a lot of great things about LinkedIn as a platform. I'm not on commission from them, but you know, discussion forums, publications. You know, there's a lot of publications from people like yourselves, even the recruitment agencies or the consulting firms. And there's quite often opportunities annually from the survey providers to go to results days, and they will quite often have like presentations on what's happening in the market, what are the hot trends, etc. Other organisation like there's one called REBA that I Reward and Benefits Association. So there's a lot of things where you don't necessarily have to pay money to attend. What I would say is I'm not London based. A lot of the things like the breakfast seminars and the networking things are London, but it's not exclusively so. So I think it's just if you're in a regional role, kind of try and seek out your networks, because there will often be, so in Scotland there are various different like HR networks you can join where you can, especially if you're in a role which is not a really big team, you can meet other people and keep up to date with what's happening.
Okay, thank you. And tips for building a professional network in HR/reward. Andre, if we could start with you first.
Yeah, just picking up on what Jane said about LinkedIn, but from a different perspective. Everyone's got their own opinion on LinkedIn and the sort of content that you get through there on that. I've been on LinkedIn from early on in my career, and I've found it is a very good way of keeping in touch with people. Having moved around jobs quite often, there was no way I was going to keep track of people with emails or things like that, or WhatsApp wasn't even a thing then. So it's a great way of just noticing where people have gone, spotting connections. And I think I would say start doing that proactively, do it as soon as you can and continue doing it. Don't be ashamed of doing it. A small, enjoyable connection, someone is worth continuing. Some people I've loved working with, but I might not speak to for 3 or 4 years, and then just a message out the blue, let's have a coffee, or how are you doing? Keep in touch with people. And sometimes those are just because you enjoyed working with them. It's just because it's nice to hear from them. That's good. But sometimes there's also this kind of serendipitous connection. And there are several roles where there just happen to be people who also enjoyed working with me, who had the right role come up at the right time. And whether that's sort of the privilege of connection or not, that's still a reality in the world today, as much as it was 20 years ago. Connections help careers. So get on LinkedIn, stay connected, don't be ashamed to connect with people. So that's a big one for me. I do think that events are good. I think that socializing is good. But for me, it's about then finding the few people that you really connect with and keeping in touch with them. I don't think you have to be a barfly or, going out, putting yourself outside of your own personality type to, back people into a corner and talk at them at a networking event. Just be yourself and stay connected.
Thanks, Andre. And Jill?
Yeah, I think I would just echo a lot of what Andre said. And it's just you will make connections along the way. And again, because I've worked in some big teams, what you'll find is that people, 10 years down the line, people are in all sorts of different industries and they themselves have made connections. So if you then needed some advice on something you've not done or trying to get a contact, then you use that network to find the answer or just to talk something through. So I think it is just that keeping those that you meet on that career journey close. And I think I've certainly done that. Yeah, just to keep the conversations going.
Thanks, Jill. Pav, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I think just to, I guess, building on what Andre and Gillian said from a networking perspective with kind of colleagues or people in the industry, but I would actually also say, having regular catch-ups with recruiters, so I think, checking in with the likes of yourself, Leona, Jack, and some of your wonderful colleagues over at Fraser Jones, because I think the benefit of that is by when we're very much in our roles, we spend a lot of our times talking about, you know, what we can do better and what we can work on in the future. But when we would link in with yourself or with some of your colleagues, we would talk about things that we've done, and you would also be up to date with, you know, what we're working on, what roles we could potentially be best suited for in the future. So, you know, when you reach out to us, rather than it being a bit of a shot in the dark, you would know that, okay, Pav has actually just ran the EU pay transparency at this firm, and this firm's looking for something. Maybe it's worth making that little introduction and connection.
Great, thank you. The next question is advice for aspiring reward leaders. I'll come to you on this, Jill.
So is this the what we wish we knew earlier?
This is how to position yourself for future leadership. Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's trying to be a little bit one step ahead. So others have touched on this with data, etc. It's if you're looking for a leadership career path, it's like, what are the opportunities where you will start to get experience where you're either managing others, managing a project, managing the resources, and actually being one step ahead. So don't wait to be told what the next step is. Try and be creative, come up with the ideas, see if you can make those processes better, and then you're putting yourself in a position where you're doing more than what was asked. And I don't mean that in a sense that, you know, you've worked till like really late hours, or it's just trying to do the next stage of the thinking. And sometimes that'll work and sometimes it won't, but you're actually putting yourself in the position of what you're going to need to do if you're then in the position of the reward leader. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. We've just got a couple more questions to run through, and then Jack will take over when it's time to open up the forum for questions and answers. So, Gillian, I'll come to you again if that's okay, just in terms of what first drew you to a career in reward, and how did your journey evolve in terms of...
So I think I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I'm still not sure fully what I will do when I grow up, but I think at the start of my career, I definitely felt like I wanted to do something that was quite creative. And I quite like things that are quite concrete in term, but equally I do quite like things that are quite concrete and quite structured, which sounds like it might sound like a bit of a mismatch there, but I found some of the generalist work wasn't really all that, it wasn't making me thrive, but I really loved the mix and reward where I could actually take that data and tell a story with it, or I could look at employee benefits and actually make a difference to people. So, you know, making a difference to people that actually, by the benefits I've put in place, that might make it that bit easier for them to do their monthly shopping, or buy a big purchase because we've put discounts in place, or get private medical help when they could, you know, it's helped them bypass the wait list. So I think it's really looking at, I find the creativity in that of telling the stories about how reward and how our reward packages really help people, like, just hugely motivates me. So I think early on I could see that, and that just became my kind of passion from a work point of view. And I just love the mix of, I'm very happy to be stuck in a spreadsheet all day, but there's lots of other things I will do as well. So it's the variety. It's just a huge amount of variety.
Great. And Pav, I'll come to you next.
So I think I mentioned it a little bit in the opening remarks, but for me, when I was first starting my career, it was either kind of between the finance route or the reward route. You know, it was either kind of group finance, because I'm very much a numbers person, analytical person, I guess, from my degree background as well. But it was literally that point about, well, you know, we're not dealing with cost centers, we're dealing with people. You know, we're not reducing the budget of cost center 0010 by 5%. We're reducing Joe Bloggs, John Smith, we're reducing their bonuses by this, and then understand that that's going to have a direct impact on people's lives. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it's fair to say that every single role in a firm is critical and it needs to be there. It's clearly there for a reason. But I think compensation, reward just has a bit of a special place within a firm, because we are there to really incentivize. And if we weren't there, I think it's fair to say that no one else would be there as well. So it's just having that kind of human side and human element to it is what really what drove me to it.
Okay, super. I'm just ask one more question, guys, if that's okay, and then we'll open up the forum. And I'll come to you, Andre, first. What were the defining projects or roles that helped accelerate your career?
I think most key projects that I worked on were ones where there was a massive change going on in the organization. And there were a couple. One was an IPO. And then over the next couple of years, things didn't go so well. And so there were also redundancies and well. So that sort of arc in that role and running projects in that let me see the full process, the full positives, negatives, challenges of being in a reward role, and seeing how that impacts employees. So the intensity of that in one role and seeing that through was a great learning process, but also one that made me appreciate the importance of the role. Another couple of projects that were quite similar, so I bundled them together, setting up reward functions. Again, changing environments, I think, give you the most opportunity to learn and to be adaptable and to try new things that maybe you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do in another role that was in a steady state. So seeing how you set up a reward function, designing policies and processes, putting systems in place, or using sticky tape to make things work that you've already got, is very sleeves rolled up and makes you understand the cost benefit of every single decision you have in the reward. So when I mentioned before about doing interim roles or going into changing organizations or consulting, I think that's so good for your career and understanding yourself and knowing what you like and where your strengths are, even if you don't stay doing that kind of work, even if it stretches you and challenges you in ways that you wouldn't want to do longer term, I would recommend trying those things at least once.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, look, thank you. Well, that was brilliant and some really, really useful insights there. Conscious of the time, we've put this in the diaries for quarter past. So keen to allocate some time for some of the Q&As that have come through. So just give me a moment. There's a fair few questions that I need to get through. Some of them are just open to any of you guys, so feel free to chip in if you feel like you've got an answer. Other people have specified a named panelist. So the first one actually is directed at you, Gillian. With AI becoming more prominent, what skills do you think will become even more important for the reward analyst?
I think it's that bit about understanding your data. So I think AI gives us some shortcuts in the analysis potentially, where it is very useful, some of the tools that we have now in helping analyze data or create data sets, create dashboards, etc. But you still really need to you need to understand what the numbers are telling you and what the stories are telling you. So I think it helps us get to the value add quicker. It just saves us time in getting to the answer. It doesn't take away our jobs. It just makes us get to, I think, what the interesting bit is faster, because we've not spent all the hours building this. We've maybe not spent as many hours building the spreadsheet. We've got straight to whatever the set of figures are that are telling us, and then we're interpreting it. So I don't think I think. And then I think the other place, though, where it can become really interesting is on those processes. So if you've got a benefit system and it takes, 10 clicks and a password to get into it, it's not going to be engaging your employees. So how can you actually use it to, again, maybe get rid of some of those straightforward questions that come into a rewards mailbox about how do I find out who my income protection provider is, or how do I make a claim on my dental. And so if we can work with the providers as well and get cleverer in some of these processes, again, it frees us up to do the really value add work, I think.
Perfect. And then another question that's come in that can be open for any of you. What would be your recommendations to stand out when looking for a reward manager level role in a different industry to your current experience?
And I've crossed sectors quite a lot, so I can talk about that if you like. I
Thank
think
you.
whenever I've changed role, I've looked for different things to leverage off. Sometimes that can be a project type. So, for example, if I'm changing from a law firm to a chemical company, if I've delivered the same setup of, say, a new reward team or whatever specialist project it is, if you can find those similar experiences, you can leverage off them. Sometimes it's leveraging off a level of hierarchical development. You can trade down or trade across for a lateral move. And sometimes it's about building those connections as well and emphasizing different aspects of your CV. So changing some of the keywords that you've got in there, removing some of the sector things, or describing things just in a slightly different way without being untruthful can help you get that foot in the door. And ultimately, it could be a numbers game. You might apply to 50 roles in that desired sector and get one interview, but you only need the one role. So it's worth a go.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks, Andre. I've got some quite specific questions. And again, these are open to anyone who feels like they've got an answer. So this one's come in. I'm well developed in Power BI. However, my business functions, specifically in the people team, are still in the paper form stage. I've tried to engage with lunch and learn sessions to bring them more up to speed, but I'm not getting as much traction as I like. They don't even use my dashboards, but I do signpost them to them. Any advice for getting people to bring them to be a more technological people function?
Yeah, I can take that one, I think, Jack. So yeah, I've personally been in these situations as well when, you're coming in from maybe an external, you're a new hire, you wanted to implement change management. And I think it's fair to say that as human beings, change is probably the thing that we are most hesitant of. It might be glaringly obvious that, what we're doing is not the best way to do something. But if someone was to propose something new, it might be a massive time saver. It might eliminate a lot of errors. It literally is just that piece parallel. So in the example that has been shared, I would be showing how, well, okay, well, here's the regular stuff that you're used to. You're used to seeing these dashboards, you're used to seeing these paper forms. Let's also get the same data visible on this Power BI dashboard. So in a way, the consumers of this data, they can start developing links in their brain that actually, well, okay, this is essentially the same data that I'm seeing in my Word document or this printout that I've got, except it's just presented in a different way. Or row 3 on this piece of paper is actually that lovely figure up there that actually, that's dynamic, and I can actually refresh there, and I don't have to print out another page. I can actually do it all there. So I guess learn to associate your old processes with your new processes, as opposed to saying, right, this is a brand new function, it's going to change the world. Ensure that there's that link between the two, because otherwise people, as human beings, we will naturally be cautious of change.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And look, again, I'm really conscious of the time, so if you don't mind, I'll just ask one more question, but then do feel free to follow up with anything specific that you'd like answered post webinar. And this is, how do you balance staying at a company long enough to make your mark? E.g., I've transformed from my role from a manual Excel spreadsheet based role to a dynamic role where the pulling of reports is about 5% of what I do and the storytelling is a majority. I don't know how long I should stay to keep up this reputation I have, or would exposure into a new organisation be something better for me?
I'll start on this one. I mean, I don't think there's one right answer to this, okay? Because
Yeah.
there's lots of personal reasons why you stay in an organization or move. So sometimes it's the job content, sometimes it's the culture. For me, sometimes it's been the commute. That you just think, actually, I don't think I can I don't want to do 4 hours commuting a day anymore. I just need to find something closer to home. So I don't think there's one right answer for that, but I think and sometimes a way of starting to test that is to do what Pav mentioned earlier and talk to some recruiters and just see, well, actually, does it sound like there are other roles out there that would be more exciting, or equally in your current organisation, what more can you do? What more can you take on? So I think don't be afraid to have career conversations with your manager. You know, as a manager, I've always been really proud if I've helped somebody get to what I think is a better position. If that's right for them, that's right for them. And actually maybe they'll come back to the organization in future, or you know, they'll go and do great things somewhere else. So I don't think I would say don't move for the sake of moving, but there's always going to be a lot of different reasons behind that, I think. I don't know if anyone else has a perspective.
Just to add, it never hurts to be looking at LinkedIn and seeing what compares to your role. You know, there's no harm. You don't have to apply for anything. Just be aware of the market. It also helps you learn new things, see what other projects are being recruited for. It's worth doing.
And I think I'll just very quickly add, conscious of times, that you know, in my career, I've been quite fortunate to have worked at a multitude of different companies in quite a short frame of time. And you know, as long as you're moving for the right reasons, you know, your network, your industry, they will know. So if it is a case that within, you know, 8 to 12 months you realize that, you know, you've actually maxed out on what you can do at a firm, and you actually have explored everything internally, and then I think there's nothing wrong with looking externally, and then, you know, checking in with your recruitment network, because because at the end of the day, they're not just looking for the next move for you. They're going to look for the next 3, 5, the next 10, 15 years of your career. So they'll be like, well, okay, if you move now, you might be able to move now, but then that's going to have a detrimental impact on your next move, or when you're now going to go for that head of reward role. And it's like, well, they need to see a little bit of consistency staying somewhere. So, you know, check in with your recruitment contacts, but also don't be, to Andre's point, you know, don't be ever intimidated of looking elsewhere, or just seeing what might make more sense for you as an individual.
Oh, brilliant. And with that, unfortunately, we have run out of time. So sorry for those that have put in questions that I haven't able to put forward to the panel. But I'd like to thank so much to our brilliant panel and to all of you for joining us today. Hopefully there have been some insights and useful nuggets of information for you there. If today has sparked questions, ideas, or even a bit of career curiosity, don't let it stop here. Reach out, connect, feel free to drop us a message, and we will always be happy to talk. Thanks again for being part of today's session, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you all.